Welcome to File Exchange, a channel dedicated to elevating the voices of artists, writers, and curators who have a focus on art made with 3D software. Each episode offers a behind-the-scenes look at the philosophies, techniques, and perspectives of the guests and their relationship with 3D software. Hi, I'm Sophie Khan. Joining me today is my usual co-host, Colette Robbins. Today we are flipping the script. We're having our friend and former guest, Natasha Chuk, an art and media scholar, join us to delve into Colette's work. Natasha will be interviewing Colette and exploring her work in files to get a better understanding of her identity as a hybrid digital artist. Colette Robbins fuses her background as a painter with 3D software to create unique polymer artifacts using found 3D scans and her own face. She digitally sculpts, 3D prints, and physically transforms the pieces to produce eclectic works that reference themes from occultism, medical practices, neuroscience, and psychology. Her approach reveals the artist's hand in work that is born digital but made physical, as she crafts imagined histories from digital fragments. Robbins' sculptures, reminiscent of sci-fi illustrations, evoke images of futuristic extraterrestrial idols.
So
thank you, Sophie.
And thank you for having me back on your show, File Exchange. Since my last appearance, Colette and I have had a chance to collaborate on several projects. And I got to delve into this whole idea, which I think she does really well, of pushing for a more robust definition of sculpture. And I really like the idea of image as sculpture. So I kind of want that to be a running theme in my head as Colette talks about her work, in addition to the concept of space as material. So I see, Colette, that you have some of your visual maps or sort of mood boards open, and I'm really eager to hear about all of this.
Let me get that opened up. So here we go. I'm going to just start by showing this image of my sculpture that's installed at the New York Academy of Art right now. And this sculpture is called Personifier. And this is the mood board for Personifier. And it's something, I created this just for this episode simply because the way I go through sources is it would be very confusing to the outsider. So, but this is essentially what I do with my digital hoarding is I kind of pick and it's forms start to emerge as I marinate on these different types of sources. And I'm really interested in the kind of drama of the early film in the 1920s and 30s, and when photography just kind of was invented and kind of becoming more ubiquitous. And then I'm also interested in very everyday objects like radiators or keys, but also ancient key shapes. And then, armor and death masks. And this particular piece was really inspired, and I actually used the scan of the L'Inconnu de la Seine, the famous death mask of the unknown woman of the Seine, which actually, when I first started using that, the death mask, Sophie was the one who always, like with the encyclopedic memory, remembered.
I'm just obsessed with death masks because I'm like I'm an art goth over here. That's all it is.
Well, that's the thing I think we have in common is our love of death masks as well. But this one in particular, you brought to my attention that she was the most kissed woman in the world because she was the face they used for the crash test dummies. So
and the CPR dummies, both those things, like most reproduced.
Exactly. And then she also was, speaking of goth, she was kind of the like macabre icon for the Victorians in their art studios. And, because the technology of plaster casts, was getting more affordable for middle class people and not just, super wealthy people, then everybody was able to kind of work with her. So I think she's a great symbol, an icon that was fun to play with and mix up in my sculpture. And then I grew up with in old houses with radiators everywhere. And I still live in an old building with radiators, and I find that form really fascinating with all the negative space and the slats. And then of course my love of the phrenology and these kind of pseudosciences and medical practices that are completely have completely been debunked, but at the time really were considered cutting edge, or maybe something that could be really helpful. And yeah, so that's kind of, it's a lot to kind of process here, but if you take a look at the piece after seeing that, and then, you know, seeing the scale of the piece, the side of the piece, and, you know, even seeing this kind of side angle and bringing back to the idea of the key, that's a big part of, you know, what I do when I'm looking at all of these sources. And I'll show you as well. 1 minute here.
And everyone should go see this show, by the way, if you're in New York. It's at the New York Academy. And the scale of it is really impressive. She has a real presence in person. And that experience of moving around and the face revealing and kind of unrevealing between the slats, it's almost like a lenticular, you know, but in much larger sculptural scale. So yes, we'll make sure we put all the details in the comments for the dates and location of that show.
But I also just wanted to say that, like, okay, so I showed you this kind of visual map that I created, but then you can see where that comes from. It comes from all of these different boards that I'm super inspired by, and they're all over the place. So I kind of feel like I'm like a digital scrap hoarder. You know, I'm always just any kind of all of these, and some of it's very funny, and some of it is like, you know, really interesting, you know, old artifacts of like technology that was used, or, you know, ceremonial armor, or, you know, definitely. And then I also love campy fantasy, sci-fi, imagery.
Yes.
So, which I know you can, I know you can relate, and you know, even things like these like funny movies, these idea of what like an android would be, or what the future is going to be like, and it's always interesting because sometimes some aspects of a movie like this is from Videodrome, you know, it's like you could kind of connect
really
with what it looks like.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think
like also how
that's
the key almost evokes this like mechanical automaton sort of thing, like the wind-up key as well, which is like a nice way to
that's a
connect
really
it, circle back.
interesting.
Yeah.
And here's like some more of the key shapes as well that I find to be sculptures in themselves, and they're just so powerful. I love old combs, like, you know, everyday objects people use, I think, are sculptures, and they're absolutely beautiful. And so I like to kind of bring that into the work. But so I'm going to do a new share. I'm going to show you the actual working, or not the working file, but the because this file is finished, but I wanted to kind of go through like what it actually looks like to, you know, kind of work with my files. And this particular file, and this is my customized ZBrush, which I was inspired by. It was originally, we were talking, it was ages ago, we were talking with Aria Harvey, and she was talking about all her customization on ZBrush. I teach ZBrush and I teach 3D modeling, and I was thinking a lot about how, you know, this is your studio space in this, you know, in this realm here. And so it's like, it was really fun.
A lot of the handcraft.
Exactly. And to like make your mark on that. So I just wanted to show, like, so I originally, this file looked something like this when it was originally getting formed. And just really, really rough and ready, and like, you know, not, I don't think about practicality or gravity much when I'm in the very beginning phases of forming an idea. And then as I go on and I think about, well, how do I want it? Like, what texture do I want it? How do I want to put it together? Then I start getting more, I start thinking about, well, how is it going to be weighted down? Where is it going to be weighted down? And then the other thing that I think a lot about is once I have one piece, that piece becomes this kind of, it's like I've created my own like icon or symbol from all of these different symbols, and I've kind of molded them into something else. And then they end up, like, for example, I'm gonna do a new share really quick. I know I'm jumping from a lot of things.
No,
but,
no, not at all.
I just wanted to show this animation that's actually on view right now at the Orlando Museum of Art, where I took a number of my sculptures and then I cut them up and turned them into relics of themselves. And then I placed them on this pattern that I created in Photoshop from more of my digital scrapboarding. And I say that as somebody who was a avid dumpster diver when she was in undergrad. So I love like collecting old things, but I like doing it digitally for more. It's I can get more, I can do more, I can store more.
We live in New York City, you know, tight
and we
spaces.
live in New York,
like
exactly.
Yeah.
So
we don't have the barn with the, you know, cars up on blocks and whatnot.
But I love the digital aspect of it now even more. It's like kind of has opened up this whole thing. But this terracotta piece that you can see right here, which I'll pause on. This one, I cut it up just for this animation. So I did all of these like relics for the animation. And then I was just astounded by the possibilities I hadn't thought about, because I was thinking more in a kind of an end game way where it's like, okay, I make a file, it becomes a 3D print, and that's the sculpture. And I wasn't opening up the possibilities that these tools and this world, this like virtual world of making art opens up. And once I did this and I saw, okay, well, actually, I can think about each sculpture as, you know, being as like a jumping off point for a number of other types of sculptures. So then I actually made a sculpture based on this animation from that original sculpture. So that kind of jumping back and forth was that was new to me and also very fun. So you can see here, you should be back in my, are you back in my ZBrush?
Yes.
Are we? Okay, good. So I'll actually change this. You can even see. So then I made this one and played with that. And then I was, speaking of files, you know, Sophie and I talk about this all the time, but, you know, organizing files and going through your files it's a very much a part of somebody who has a kind of robust digital practice. So I was doing that the other day, and the good and the bad news was I got very sidetracked and went down a rabbit hole. And
we've all been there.
And I took this original image and I just started playing with it. Here, I'm going to change this. Actually, this feels like it needs to be more of a metal material. And I realized, like, I just did a really quick shift on the original, even before that other file I was showing you, like back to the roots of where this was coming from. And then I decided this needed to be a sculpture. And it was very different because it doesn't have all the like rocky texture, but it was like another kind of, and it's talking more about motion, which is something that I started talking about in another piece called Home is the Edge of the World, which you'll see, you can kind of see in my studio view, like on the smaller or the lower pedestal in the background. Worked on a couple of those, but this one had that kind of set, that futurist, I think Sophie brought this up, like
they're like
like 1930s, like 20s, maybe
continuous
even.
portrait of Mussolini, that whole era of the
and
head
so
portraits kind of exploded.
So I really liked the idea that these, you know, all of this this one original idea then has ended up kind of having all of these lives, and it adds to my bigger concept of wanting to create my own icons, my own idols, my own symbols from, this like rich history that we're all born into of, human history and just art history and all of these things. So that's actually starting to kind of build a language in a way I really wanted to build. And I'm also thinking, also with the keys, but each piece, I like to think about a character in language as well, like that it could potentially be a P or G back, just like and also the PBS logo.
Yes.
Oh yes.
Especially the early logo, right? Yeah.
Oh, I loved that logo,
Yeah.
and how those things have such a kind of an impact into our psyches, like the kind of
They
sponges,
do.
like that. So I do feel like, I'm definitely a sponge in terms of like what I absorb, and then want to kind of both with the tools that I use, like I'm always kind of learning other tools and really wanting to absorb them and then kind of put them back into the work. And then, so the other thing I wanted to kind of go over here is one of my absolute favorite tools in ZBrush. And the reason why ZBrush I think is so beneficial to my practice is the insert mesh brushes. So the insert mesh brushes in ZBrush has, I've never seen another piece of software that allows you to do this with such ease. But in the light box here, I have all of my custom brushes that I've created saved. And I've created a whole kind of section for them.
Cool.
And like
this
like
is great.
Sophie did a scan of my face, and I created a relic from that.
Oh,
and
awesome.
The amazing thing is I can take that and I can then add it, move it around, and like connect it with anything, so there's this like, and then I can decide whether I like sculpt it or don't. And then also the use of the insane amounts of symmetry in ZBrush has been really liberating for me. And then I can take my own sculptures and turn them into things. I'm interested in drama and kind of ceremonies, which I think also relates with why I love those kind of early 1900s photography from like theatrical, I love this like bishop's hat or archbishop's hat or cardinal hat.
Cardinal, yes.
Yeah, I just love like so I've been actually trying to figure out a form from that. And so it's like, so I mean this is a really rough kind of loose way that I go about doing my work, but I kind of work in this almost like Dada, like assemblage kind of collage, again, taking these different elements and then, and I do work on sketches as well, in addition, and kind of go back and forth.
Paper sketches.
Yeah, paper is very important to me. And when I take you through my studio with my phone, I'll show you some of the sketches on the wall over here, but it's this kind of, it's a strange process that was born out of my being originally trained as a painter and also drawing since a very, very young age, quite religiously. And so I just really feel like ZBrush has been, I'm suited to it in a way. It was very, it's kind of one of the strangest pieces of 3D software. It's not a traditional 3D modeling piece of software. And so, for a lot of people,
there's a learning curve for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But so that is, that's kind of, I'm not sure if you have any questions about any of those files or that process, but like, I also wanted to share, I have another
I just want to
maybe,
insert, I appreciate
yeah,
this demonstration. I love thinking about like, hey, how do all these images or any of these images make their way into the work, quite literally. So I really see your work as being, yes, absolutely incorporating a kind of assemblage, Dadaist, you know, image of images that become sculpted together. And this is a really nice way of illustrating that.
thank you. Yeah, no, I've been really wanting to kind of show the soup to nuts process of
Yeah.
my work, because it's not, I mean, I wish I could say it's like a super simple process, like in terms of like communicating it, but it's just not. And that's just not who I am. And it goes through all of these filters. And I think that connects with me as somebody who is a bit like a sponge of like absorbing different, ideas and images. But I think, where the art comes out is where it's translated, and how it forms in my head, and then how it forms in these pieces of software. And then the iterative process of it being in the physical world, sometimes in the form of a 3D printed sculpture,
Mhm.
or I'm going to do a new share into my Blender file. And Blender is a newer piece of software for me. This might be a little bit slow, and I can always stop it. Let me know if my connection gets a little strange, but
I don't think it's good for now.
okay, good. So it's going to be a little blurry, but this is my kind of AR gallery space that I've been making to really kind of give myself a location, a virtual location where I can play around with the idea of how do I want my work to be installed, and what do I want it to look like in that installation. And I'm going to go over here and turn this one into just as a, it's going to take a second. But yeah, so this has been really fun to kind of further the idea of what it means to be making art in these virtual spaces, is because I'm making animations, I'm making sculptures, I'm making relics of the sculptures, and so it's like fun to see, well, how would I want them installed together, and really having a lot of agency and making those choices through using these tools. Whereas like without these tools, I feel like it's a lot harder without having, institutional exhibitions like at museums, where you could have all of the resources to put together an installation of your choosing. So now I get to kind of like set those terms using these tools in a way that I think is it's very liberating for artists. I'm thinking a lot
Yeah, and
about
it's
that.
like a hugely more expansive space, and it's much faster,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
certain rules don't apply either. I mean, I think
Yes.
what all this like highlights, and it's something that you and I talk about a lot, like in our conversations and also in our interviews, but the sense of liquidity that the digital sculpture has, the sense that you begin with a file and it's kind of malleable almost infinitely, I mean, within the parameters of our software. And then that file, can be subject to all kinds of manipulations, and then it can be recombined with others. And, there's a point where you maybe hit pause on that and it's produced. But there are many more potentialities, I guess, for that one piece, because it's begun in a digital way. And this is like, I used to wrestle with this so much in my practice too. I used to have, I mean, almost like a shame around it, like I would never show a 3D print and a render in the same gallery, because it seemed like I couldn't decide. I felt like it was like a sign of weakness, which is so silly,
Can't
because
commit to a
that's
medium or something. Yeah.
yeah, but that's one of the unique properties of this medium, for sure. And I know, Colette, like we've talked a lot about remixing, and then particularly like kit bashing. If you want to define that word for
Oh,
people who are
yes.
not familiar with it, it's a great word.
Yeah.
I love the term kit bashing because of its roots with the kind of nerdy hobbyists, like who were kind of getting these kits of plastic parts that they then could remix and place in different configurations, and that was referred to as kit bashing, or bashing your kit. And I feel like that's kind of a contemporary version of collaging with 3D. So I think kit bashing is an amazing term that I'm hoping gets used a lot more, because I see a lot of artists out there using that. There's another term for artists, painters, who use a lot of Photoshop, photo bashing. So I think kit bashing should kind of at least have a little bit of a life, hopefully, while using, for at least with me, with insert mesh brushes, they feel like kits. And I also, I collect those from a website called My Mini Factory, and there's this project called Scan the World, which I'll link in the description. And it's a really incredible open source community of scanners around the world who are scanning antiquities and sharing them, and to share the knowledge of you know, artworks for everybody to have access to them. And I think it's an incredible educational tool to be able to access scans of these sculptures. And, you know, being present with scanning antiquities is how I got my start in 3D back in 2012 with MakerBot.
Metropolitan Hackathons, right? The Met Museum, yes.
And being part of that, it changed my life forever, because it was like one of those imprinted moments where I realized I could touch art, I could touch history, I could have my hand in this world that I had previously felt very removed from. I mean, no matter, you know, what way you slice it, as a woman, you're not going to see yourself in art history in the same kind of way. And that has a kind of a psychic toll over time, and thinking, okay, well, how could I fit in then into this? How could I be part of this canon if I'm not seeing this? I mean, I have the my mom's copy of Jansen's art history, and I don't think there's any women in it, and it's an incredible book. It's an incredibly well-made book, but it's, you know, so I think that, and I don't even think I had put those pieces together when I did this hackathon, but it was like there was this activation in my brain where I felt a way in. I felt, and I think that a lot of artists can relate with this, is like not feeling on the inside, feeling on the outside. Even if you have shows and you're doing things, like just feeling, because it's not just about fitting into the career, it's about connecting with the world you live in, and your art connecting with the world you live in and with the people that you connect with. And so for me, like, that was the opportunity. It kind of showed me I had to go on this like new learning journey, which is sometimes a little bit different than what a traditional trajectory for an art career could be, where you kind of, you go to grad school, you come up with your concept, your style, and then you repeat that, and then you kind of get this brand. And I just didn't, that didn't work for me as an artist. That wasn't what fed me. That wasn't what got me into the studio. And so it was this, I had to go on this journey to kind of figure out, well, what is it that like gets me into the studio? Why do I want to make art, and what do I want to share with the world? And so being able to connect with art history in such a tangible way, and then be able to have access to tools where I could produce things, the scale and the frequency that I really felt inclined to do with 3D printing, kind of just, it opened up all of these avenues for me. It was a huge learning curve, and it was really painful in the beginning to become knowledgeable in digital tools when I had zero background in that. And I was very tactile, hands-on painter, sometimes, just everything was about, the touch. And so the way in for me was the stylus, and being able to touch the screen and to be able to feel like I was drawing or painting sculptures.
I love that.
Yeah. And I think if you look on my website and you see some of my previous works on paper, they're all drawings of sculptures. So it was clear that my psyche was telling me to make physical work, or make work that's like talking about 3 dimensions. but
Do you want
I
to bring those
just
up, Colette? Just like while we're talking, do you want to quickly show us some of the works on paper?
give me one moment
Just
here.
for
Let me just get
context.
into my I'm just gonna as we I just need to get right
Oh
Just to,
yeah, take
page.
your
just to
time.
build on what we were saying earlier about the file becoming, iterative and, being like multiple artworks and having some questions about that. I think from like an outsider's perspective, there's a real joy in being able to experience a work across different mediums.
Mhm.
Different vantage points, different ways of engaging with the textures. So I think it's a really interesting way of thinking about these as individual works, despite them coming from the same file.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like every medium you put it in, it's going to
yeah,
feel so different, or every,
absolutely.
even like finish or treatment. But yeah, being able to connect the dots too, I really enjoy.
Yeah,
And like
exactly.
I also, yeah, the more we talk about some of this too, the more I kind of think about like the radicalness um, of working with remixing and kind of sampling, because I know that there's a lot of museums are not very happy about their collections being made open source, or their
Right.
collections being, I think there's been a lot of um, many institutions have embraced that and many have not.
Right.
And also, like, if you look at a project like Marisha Yari's work, where she was using digital tools, 3D modeling, 3D printing, to reconstruct artifacts that were, destroyed by ISIS, and kind of delving back into those archives, which had been quite neglected. There's a sense of reclaiming history. There's a sense of like redistributing it.
Yeah,
And
sharing
even
it.
like around, and also resisting the kind of corporate logic of
Sure.
the 3D industry is challenging. I mean, I'm in a similar boat as Colette. I used to spend so many thousands of dollars when I had them, which mostly I didn't, on, like working with really large scale factories, like hiring people because I didn't have the skills myself. And so being able to take a hand in those tools and kind of really take control of your means of production, for want of like a better way of putting that, is really liberating.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's something that is I think it's changed the landscape of what's possible for a individual artist and what an artist studio looks like, which is
Yeah.
why Sophie and I started this channel, because
Yeah.
we are in the midst of this sea change with what artists are able to do, which is why one of the reasons why I absolutely love teaching these tools is because I do see them as like bridges to the future. They are
Mhm.
tools that are really helpful for, at least even if just being exposed to them, just understanding the language of our world, since they're used in so many places now, even
Sure.
places you wouldn't think. um and yeah, I just being able to say I would want an exhibition that includes, these arranged like this without having to use actual materials, and that I would then throw away, is really amazing too. The kind of, and
Mhm.
also not having to have a bunch of like tons of studio assistants in order to kind of produce at the level I want to produce at, or, being able to store my digital files, or being able to make something massive and outdoor through just kind of the creation on the computer without having to make a huge mock-up is very liberating, and it's really kind of um changed what was possible for me, and keeps me excited and wanting to keep making work. And then, not to mention, I just also want to add, before I'll kind of jump into my phone and show you guys around my studio a little bit, but I also want to add that there's something about you know the tools themselves that are kind of networked tools, because they're so complex, and they take so much time to learn, and they require a lot of kind of socializing in order, whether it's through connecting with YouTube tutorialists, or through
Yeah.
connecting with community members on Discord channels, or whatever it is. They're kind of networked tools, and now that they're connected into the NFT world, which is also a very networked kind of community, which is about like it's using social media as the means of sales. I know people have done that before individually, but it's almost like the storefront is the social media in a different way than I've previously seen, specifically with Twitter. And so these tools have connected me with a whole range of people, and that I never thought, possible, of being kind of my contacts and connections. And and I learn from all of them. And so I think there's that openness to sharing and learning when you have struggled with learning digital tools and maybe you didn't come from that place, or also the learning curve is steep even if you did come from a place of digital or a digital background. So that I think has been really lovely, because initially in the art world, like, that was not as there was not this open-minded, like, let's share how we made this, let's share how we went about this, or how we achieved this goal. Whereas in the 3D, it's just understood that if you start talking software with somebody who also uses it, that you start sharing tips and tricks. It's just that is that is the norm, not the exception. And so there was something about that energy around it that also kept me coming back to it, because I am a social person who I like to socialize from my own space, which is why I love New York City. I like being like stacked with other humans near me, but I like my space, within all of that. So, and speaking of, I'm going to do a little walkthrough with my phone, because you can see my phone camera over there.
No, everything you just described, it dispels the myth of like the artist as genius, this idea that it's not important to collaborate or to share tips, this sort of vulnerability or weakness that suggests. I don't know, like the open source tools are intended to be shared and changed, and there's nothing too precious about them, and it's a really interesting way of thinking about it in this work. Also, I want to point out, I really see an organic relationship between your drawings and your 3D sculpture practice. You do have a brand, if you will, you have
I do. It took me a really long time to figure it out, but now I have it, and and I think that's the thing about a brand. It's got to really be authentic and work for you, but you have to be really into it. And I was not once I made a painting, I was like, that's not enough. I need something else. And I think it's because I was yearning for another medium and I didn't know it at the time. So that was something. Now these guys that you're seeing are not finished. They're still not put together. They have had some filling and painting, but they have a lot of sanding, and you can see kind of in their raw state kind of what they're looking like.
But it's great to see them in process here.
Well, it's like seeing a working file. It's a working sculpture. And then this is kind of a wall of like sketches and just different ideas or influences, and kind of just figuring out new compositional structures. And some of them never end up happening. Like some of them are just completely not going to happen. And then you can see you. And this is my kind of relatively messy studio, but the reason why I wanted to show you this is because I actually designed this whole desk and space, because my space isn't that huge, and I decided to design a space where it was both. And then my husband built me my computer here, which is quite beautiful with its little I have to show that off, because I don't have a lot of space, but I wanted it to be something that was incredibly me, in the sense that I could display, I could be using all my tools. I could have some plants, I could have lots of light, and this one's about to go to a show in Beacon.
Cool.
And I'll link that in the bio. And then these guys, and then I've got a little more storage, but you know, it's not a big
Mhm.
space, and I'm able to do quite a lot. And these guys are
Mm.
two out of three of the editions of this piece that's with a gallery in Germany called Britain Gallery. And yeah, so I'll put you, oh, and this is a little prototype of that new
Cool.
version. And I'm kind of figuring that out.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, definitely futurism inspired, right?
Yes. And you can see all, so some of these tools were my great grandfather's woodworking tools. And then, you know, different relics from like the different engineers in my family. I'm wearing my father's engineering coveralls, which was the first outfit I wore when I made art as a child, and I still wear it. And yeah, so that's kind of a little tour into the physical studio in this virtual interview.
That's great.
And yeah, I mean, I hope that kind of clarifies some of the textures and
it does.
kind of techniques.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And one other thing,
scale at all? Can you talk about like how you decide on scale? Because you have so much freedom. It's so liberating to work in these digital contexts. And now that we see the work in physical form, does that change for you at all?
So you're asking like how I decide scale on each of these pieces?
Including in the animations and in the kind of virtual experience as well. How you decide on the scale of your objects?
Right. I mean, it's very intuitive in terms of like which one needs to be what size. Like with the home is the edge of the world, the share, hold on, I'm gonna reshare. Second. I knew I needed it to be life size. Like it needed to be the size of an actual foot. So that was a good starting place. And for like this one over here, I knew that I wanted the foot to be larger than life. Like it felt like it was like not like monumental, a human. Yeah, like monumental, like maybe it was part of like some sort of building structure or something, because it's even made out of structures of a building. Like this is made out of columns and like refuse from a ancient building. So I think about just what I want the overall mood of the sculpture to be. Like with this one, with the relic of personifier, I wanted it to be a little bit smaller, but it's still pretty large. It still feels like it was either, you know, it's about, I believe the face is about life size. So again, to make, I didn't realize how much my work until more recently connects with the body. It, like, you know, and the imagery that I'm doing connects with the body. And I think playing with the scale even more has helped push that side of the work a lot more, because it is about the body and our, you know, specifically like to kind of talk a little bit more about the concepts too, because you know, I'm thinking a lot about, you know, what gets removed from our lives and what is added when we're having these dual identities, these like digital and physical identities. And I also think about, you know, the kind of the foghorn experience of being on Twitter, everybody screaming and like discussions being like, you know, who has the loudest opinion or who can make somebody feel like they're not, you know, their opinion isn't as pure as it should be, or it's not
Twitter.
based.
We've talked about how much we hate Twitter.
I mean,
like
I love it too.
You love hate.
I love it. I absolutely, I've made some really genuine friendships on Twitter, and I have, but there's this side to it that I've had to kind of filter, is the right word, filter through and discern like how do I want to engage, just like where I was deciding with my art, like what do I want to share with the world. With Twitter, it's like what do I want to share with Twitter? Because like that's a different identity. Like those parameters change kind of like it's different than going over to somebody's house and just chatting. You know, it's like Twitter is its own environment. These digital environments, these digital homes that we are kind of existing, where our page becomes our you know, the interior design we do is like how do you organize your page? What is your pinned tweet? All of these little things that are starting to become part of, if you're a visual creative person who's sharing things with the world, you're starting to think about. And so thinking about, well, what would be a ceremonial piece of armor in the future? And so that's why I've been thinking about these kind of things, and what does that look like, or what would, you know, and what would it be symbolic of? And I think for me, it's the idea, and I'll show you this other one, double blind, up close a little more. I think I've got it in here. Yeah, this one, where it's this, you know, it's two faces. One, you actually see the full form, and the other is kind of embedded in the front. And it's about, but it's also kind of the shape of a helmet, or it's this, which I also think helmet shapes are very much like connecting with this idea of masculinity, and with like, you know, this idea of aggression, and but I also
and fear,
kind of,
right?
And fear, and like there is a lot of fear in the world right now. And I made this one in 2021. It was in our Sophie and I's exhibition at spring break, called Chapel. And it is a lot about, armor is a lot about protection and about fear. And I think there's a lot of fear on social media, and also just discussions around AI, and like all of these different tools. Even when I was first using 3D, there was so much angst around, well, what does that mean? Is that a real piece of art? I still have students who ask me, is 3D printing real art? Like what is
You've had
all
artists, like artists
I've
that
had
you visited,
artists
very prominent artists tell you that it's not real
like
art, right?
saying that 3D printing
Naming no names.
shouldn't be shown in galleries. And like, so it's, you know, but now the discussion has, and then NFTs were going to ruin the world. And now, and I'm not saying there are so many negative things about all of these things, including, and social media being, you know, one of them. And, but we're kind of in these spots as humans and creatives that are kind of trying to figure out, well, where do we stand in all of this, and how do we navigate this? And we're lucky, with my age, I'm lucky enough to have been pre social media and pre, you know, well, I had a phone my first cell phone when I was 16, which was young then, 15 or 16. It was the size of a brick. But you know, so I don't know. So that's kind of that's part of the work too, is just thinking about how are we going to filter this as it becomes more and more part of our bodies, as it becomes, you know, as we start using more, you know, VR is probably just going to be part of like our glasses, or, you know, maybe it's going to be implants that we get into, you know, how are we going to kind of filter that, and, you know, as this progresses at a pretty fast pace. And so it's like, for me, I
technology
need
becoming this like prosthetic, this, you know, adjunct to our own
yes,
bodies.
exactly. And so it's like, for me, my art gives me this, like, it gives me and the fact that I'm engaged in these tools in these places, I feel like I'm part of the conversation, and that I can have applause in my art to reflect, you know, all of the different emotions and thoughts about this kind of impending change that is just with us. And for better or for worse, I'm not, you know, it's just, it is like, so that's where I'm coming from with that. And one of the reasons why I'm so obsessed with textures, and you know, just the kind of tactility that I can create. I'm going to go back to ZBrush. I know. Yeah. Okay. Do you see me in ZBrush here?
Yes.
So the one other thing I wanted to talk about, my other obsession, was the other thing in ZBrush that is so amazing, is the amount you can, the alphas you can use, which is, if those of you who are watching or listening out there, because I realize some people listen to this, and treat it like a podcast while they're working. Another thing you can, create, I mean, you can create pretty much anything, is these alphas, and you can even create, for a while, I was like, ooh, maybe I should do like an imprint of, I really liked this fearful face.
Oh yeah.
And this kind of hysteria, this like, which is another thing that Sophie and I can kind of connect with.
Yeah.
And you can kind of
Oh,
turn
this is
anything
hysterical.
into an alpha, and then if and then you can kind of, you can, it's so cool that you can just immediately, so you can take a drawing, you can also turn that alpha into a 3D extrusion, which is how I got into ZBrush in the first place, because I took a whole series of Rorschach ink blots that I had made, and I then extruded them through
Cool.
alphas, and then
Yeah.
sculpted on them. So yeah, so I that's kind of, that sums up quite a lot of my process and a lot of my work. And
Yeah.
and you guys asked some really good questions too, but I just want to say, if anybody's in New York City, go to the New York Academy of Art until March 5th.
March
And
5th,
then I'm going to
sorry.
be in a show that opens March 11th in Beacon. I'll put details in that. And then I've got a piece up, an animation up at the Orlando Museum of Art. And for the NFT
Cool.
friends, I just minted along with this episode, and you can take a look at that on object.com, and I'll link that. But I want to hear what's happening too with Sophie, like what you've got going on. I know you've got lots going on, and with Natasha, as we wrap up.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I am knee deep in like tiny details and engineering details for my piece, which is, this is my very janky prototype, but it's going to be commissioned by the Parks Department and the Art Students League, and it's going to be in Riverbank Park in, according to our current Gantt chart, July, but possibly later.
Wow.
And so this is going to be life-size,
beautiful,
and aluminum, cast aluminum. So right now, just all the practicalities of like, this is going to break when we cast it, where do we slice it? So that's intense, but it's fun. And then,
can you show the bottom of it? Wait,
oh yeah, it's kind of busted. This is
so
a very
cool that
early,
you can make that
early prototype. Yeah, it's great. It's nice for the meetings, like the design reviews, where people who do not have the technological, the experience to like look at a file right away and get this kind of structural sense from it. Right. So there's that. I'm about to go to the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts and just do nothing but ZBrush for 2 weeks and maybe scan people. Really excited. And I've been doing these. This is what I'm going to take to BCCA because they are flat and they don't weigh anything. Is some of these face bas-relief sculptures.
Oh wow,
so beautiful. Wait, show the side of it.
Oh yeah, wait, I'm just going to pin this too. Like, hang on, I'll pin the videos. So it's just like that.
Oh.
And then the idea is to paint to give it more dimensionality, like a kind of cameo glass. I'm like obsessed with cameo glass, or like a depth map to it. So this is just with the priming. We love the gray primer. We go through cans of this.
Filler primer.
Yeah. And that's about where I'm at this week. Natasha, how about you?
Very exciting. Well, I'm also knee deep in a book that I'm writing, where I'm talking about lots of these topics, these issues related to photography. So this is a book called Traces in the Image, the photographic in post photography. So I'm really concerned with, identifying where the image exists in works like yours, and how we can regard kind of imaging practices in this post photography environment, which is really complex. So I'm trying to shed some light on what that means. And hopefully this will come out, the plan is it will come out next year, 2024. And I'm also co-organizing an all-day symposium on AI,
cool.
called AI in the Lens and Screen Arts. And this is with the MFA Photography, Video and Related Media Department, where I teach at the School of Visual Arts. And that will be on March 18th. So that will be an all-day symposium where we talk about just some changes in
Amazing.
education and ethics, creativity, just all things related to AI. And
Is that something open to
it is.
people
It's
outside
open,
of
it's
SBA?
free and open to the public. I can provide a
Okay.
link.
Yes,
Registration
definitely.
is required in advance, but yeah, it's open to the public in person.
Oh, cool.
Um,
We'll put that on our calendars, March 18th.
Definitely, definitely. So yeah, that's all that's happening.
Exciting. All
Well, thank
right.
you
Well, that was so
much.
Great.
Thank you, Colette.
Thank you for being
Yeah,
here.
and everybody who's new to this channel, just make comments, share future guests you want us to have on,
Yeah,
and
please, recommendations. We're always open.
yes, and take a look at the last episodes we have. We have an amazing episode with Natasha here, where she digs
Yeah.
more into her concepts and ideas behind her writing and her scholarly work, and a number of other guests. Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much,
having me.
everybody.